I hate that I have to do this next story, but I have to do it because there's so much riding on this next election. Joe Rogan recently said very nice things about Bernie Sanders and that he'd likely vote for Bernie Sanders. Some people are calling it an endorsement, others are not. Whether it is or isn't an endorsement or just praise, a portion of the left has gone absolutely crazy in the really toxic, self-destructive, circular firing squad way that I have been begging and pleading the left not to do since day one of the 2020 Democratic race. Now, it's important to understand there are two sides to this. There are people who are sort of in the Bernie camp who are furious about Bernie accepting / not rejecting the nice words from Joe Rogan. There are also centrist opportunists who are using this to fuel unrest within the left. And I'm going to talk about both of them. But first, let's look at a sort of condensed version of what Joe Rogan said. This was assembled by the Bernie Sanders campaign. This is part of the anger that Bernie would use what Joe Rogan said and use it as campaign video, as campaign material. Let's take a look at it.
Who are you going to vote for in the primary?
I think I'll probably vote for Bernie. Him as a human being, when I was hanging out with him, and I believe in him. I like him. I like him a lot. What Bernie stands for is a guy who, well, look, you could dig up dirt on every single human being that's ever existed if you catch them in their worst moment and you magnify those moments and you cut out everything else and you only display those worst moments. That said, you can't find very many with Bernie. He's been insanely consistent his entire life. He's basically been saying the same thing, been for the same thing his whole life. And that in and of itself is a very powerful structure to operate from.
And there are people on the left, including Bernie supporters, who are saying this is disgusting. Joe Rogan is horrible. He's transphobic. He's sexist. He's homophobic. He's racist, misogynistic, throwing everything out there. And Bernie should reject the endorsement, if it was even an endorsement. Again, Joe says he's going to vote for Bernie. Not everybody should vote for Bernie. He's not saying I'm endorsing Bernie. He's saying, I think I'll probably vote Bernie. That doesn't even really matter here. What are we doing? Why are we this stupid? There are two camps here, okay? There are the people who genuinely support the Bernie politics and are furious about Joe Rogan because they don't like Joe Rogan. They don't want Joe Rogan's help in getting Bernie elected. Then there are people who don't actually support Bernie Sanders, and they're fabricating the anger to try to hurt Bernie. Concern trolling. Oh, if someone as transphobic and sexist as Joe Rogan is supporting Bernie, that should really get us to be concerned about Bernie Sanders, right? Those types of people. I want to focus on the people actually mad at Bernie for embracing rather than rejecting the endorsement first. Joe Rogan is one of the biggest podcasts in the world. You combine the YouTube audience, about 7.25 million subscribers on one channel, about 3.5 million on the other channel. That's 10 million YouTube subscribers. You combine that with one of the largest audio podcasts in the world. Joe Rogan is saying to his audience, especially, by the way, if you believe Joe Rogan's audience is to the right of Bernie Sanders and to your right, like if you're a leftist and you see Joe and his audience as to your right, Joe Rogan is saying to his audience, hey, I'm probably voting for Bernie Sanders, arguably the leftmost person here. Wouldn't you be happy about that as a leftist? Joe Rogan could single-handedly be handing primary wins to Bernie Sanders with his endorsement or praise of Bernie. In some of these states where it's Bernie Biden by a few points within the margin of error, and they're both going to end up with a similar number of delegates because of proportional apportionment. Why wouldn't you want Joe Rogan to possibly flip states in Bernie's favor? That's how big and influential Joe Rogan's platform is. So if you like Bernie and you want Bernie to win, and you're publicly denouncing Joe Rogan and saying you don't want the endorsement, what's wrong with you? Joe actually makes the argument in analyzing Bernie that we should make about Joe Rogan. If you look at, 10 years or more of Joe Rogan doing this type of media, I know he's been around longer, but where you're kind of hearing Joe Rogan's thoughts, you can compile stuff that most progressives wouldn't be comfortable with in terms of comments about women, trans people, others. I've always seen Joe Rogan be willing to talk about this stuff. He had me on his program, and I told him when I thought he was doing things on his show that weren't necessarily useful in terms of how he platforms or interviews, and we just had a conversation, and it was perfectly fine. But so then what? Like if Bernie wins the nomination without rejecting Joe's endorsement and eventually Bernie is president, you're going to be upset because it happened with the help of Joe Rogan? If Joe Rogan convinces people in his audience, imagine that there's a whole bunch of transphobes in Joe Rogan's audience that hear Joe say, I think I'm voting Bernie. And they say, you know what? I'm also going to vote for Bernie. Okay, hopefully after voting for Bernie, their views on transgender people would be revised in the direction that we would agree with. Like, what's the downside to that? Why are you mad? This is the height of missing the forest for the trees. And unfortunately, some major groups are making this worse. And this is an example now of the other group. The left-wing group MoveOn.org, which some call a progressive group, some call a centrist establishment Democratic group, they are now calling for Bernie to renounce the so-called endorsement of Joe Rogan, where they tweeted, quote, it's one thing for Joe Rogan to endorse a candidate. It's another for Bernie Sanders' campaign to produce a video bolstering the endorsement of someone known for promoting transphobia, homophobia, Islamophobia, racism, and misogyny. We urge Senator Sanders and his campaign to apologize and stop elevating this endorsement. We stand in solidarity with folks hurt by this. This is the exact self-destructive nonsense that will lead to 4 more years of Donald Trump. And again, a lot of these concerns are not genuine concerns. People aren't genuinely concerned. They're using this to try to hurt Bernie. People who support Biden or Buttigieg or Warren, establishment candidates or simply other candidates, they are dishonestly and in bad faith pretending like this is a huge thing that upsets them about Bernie in order to just foment anger and division at Bernie. They just don't want Bernie Sanders to win. I don't know that I have much more to say to them other than it's working because they are firing up actual Bernie supporters and getting them to say things that make no sense. This is the worst of the left, okay? Being angry about praise from someone with one of the largest platforms in favor of your candidate, and it's absolutely and totally horrible. Now, let's do the full thing, though. Let's deal with the things Joe Rogan has said. There are clips that have been circulating of Joe Rogan saying things that sound to be racist years ago, or Joe Rogan having, insensitive or unenlightened takes on trans issues. Okay, so what do we gain by attacking Bernie over this? Clearly, Rogan agrees with Bernie on enough that he says, I'm probably voting for him. Shouldn't we say, Joe, that's great. We love that you recognize that your values and Bernie's are aligned on a lot of issues. It's good for the country. Come on over. And by the way, hopefully, as you get into this and follow Bernie's campaign, your views will evolve where we don't agree. Isn't that the actual progressive and smart and logical thing and correct thing to do? This slice of the left is not something that I'm a part of. It's small, but it's loud. And we need to make sure that they don't join forces unwittingly with the astroturfers who are actually doing this to support centrist candidates and hurt Bernie, because this will all damage our opportunity to defeat Donald Trump in November. Let's not fall for it. And I hope people in my audience will join me in not participating in it. Next Sunday is my birthday. We have a huge membership special planned for my birthday. Actually, this membership special is so outrageous. The AG of New York said, David, I'm worried that this might be too good of a deal. We may have to indict in New York State if you run this deal. And I said, you know what? I don't care. We're giving the deal on my birthday. If you want to be notified about this membership special on my birthday, just get on our newsletter, okay? Go to davidpakman.com. There's a spot in the upper right of the website to type in your email. On February 2nd, you'll be notified about this special, and it'll be a beautiful thing. One of our sponsors is privacy.com. They're giving you $5 when you sign up for their completely free service at privacy.com/Pakman. I've been using Privacy for a little over a year now. You've heard me talk about it before. It's a lifesaver, and here's how it works. It takes just a couple of minutes to set up. Anytime you buy something online or on the phone, instead of actually using your real credit card number, the Privacy app and the browser plugin let you give each company a randomized virtual credit card number that you create out of thin air. It'll even autofill the card number with one click. And the payment is taken out of your checking account without the merchant ever knowing your real information. So this allows you to keep your banking information secure, but also to take control of your finances. You can create up to 12 of these virtual credit cards a month. You can set spending limits. You can freeze them. You can delete them anytime you want. So when you do this, it means you're not going to be charged when you don't want to be, because you can destroy the virtual card number right after using it, which, for instance, I love using free trials because I know I won't be charged when the trial is over if I use a virtual credit card number. You're keeping your identity private by not telling companies who you are. You're keeping your bank or credit card info protected against data breaches and identity theft, and it's free. There's no catch whatsoever. But if you want, Privacy also offers a $10 a month plan that gives you 1% cash back and lets you create 36 credit cards a month, and a $25 a month plan tailored more for small businesses where you can create 60 card numbers a month and much more. But definitely go ahead and at least get started with the free plan. You'll protect your financial info. Companies can't charge you unexpectedly. And like I said, you'll get $5 to spend when you sign up at privacy.com/Pakman.